welcome to the morning show. We're coming to you today on WJOPLP Newburyport at FM 96.3 on Channel 9, and we're also available on Newburyport Community Media's YouTube channel at ncmhub.org. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and I'm just very happy this morning to welcome Emra Farkas here. She's a practitioner of Christian Science healing and a member of the Christian Science Board of Lectureship. And she travels and speaks internationally about Christian Science, including right here in our very own Newburyport, where she'll be giving a lecture on Sunday, June 22nd at 2 p.m. at the Senior Community Center titled, Finding Where God is Seen and Felt, What's Church Got to Do with It? So first of all, Emra, welcome to the morning show, and thank you so much for taking time to be here.
Oh, thank you, Mary. This is great.
I'm happy to have you here, and I want people to know that as they'll be able to see watching this, you are outside in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So thank you.
I'm home. Yes.
Thank you for taking the trek to Newburyport to speak with us on the 22nd.
As you can see, it's a beautiful morning here.
It is, and it's rainy and cold here. We're recording this on Tuesday, so it may be better on Thursday when this shows. I hope so. Fingers crossed, Emra. Well, Emra, I wanted to start. I know that there are a lot of misconceptions that people have about Christian Science, and so that's a good place, I think, for us to launch our conversation this morning. So could you talk some about some of the misconceptions that people have about Christian Science and set the record straight for us?
Thank you. And thanks for starting there. What I've been discovering as I've been traveling around the country is so often people confuse Christian Science with Scientology.
Ah.
And, you know, maybe it's that word science, but
Yeah.
Christian Science it's well, first and foremost Christian.
Yes, right.
Christian scientists study the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
They study Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, which is written by the woman who discovered Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy. And they're studying these books to deepen their understanding of Jesus' teachings,
Yeah.
so that they can better live those teachings in their daily lives. So one of the things that Christian scientists take seriously is where Jesus tells his followers, you can do the works that I do, the healing works, through an understanding of his teachings. And that for Christian scientists, I think, is where the science part comes in. In fact, anybody listening can go by the Christian Science reading room that the Newbury Church maintains. It's over on Merrimack Street. I think it's Suite 9. But it's open 11 to 2 every day but Sunday. And in there, you can find a 150-year record of modern Christian healing. So, maybe I should just back up a little and say, what a reading room is. A reading room, it's a place where you can find publications about Christian Science, periodicals on Christian healing. It's also a place where you can just go and hit pause. You can pray, you can find a peaceful atmosphere. I was talking to a man in Tampa a few weeks ago, and he said he traveled a lot for business, and what he really liked was that in almost every town he went, he could find a Christian Science reading room. This little oasis. So he liked having that oasis from the hectic day. And if you go, you can ask an attendant to point you to these bound volumes of periodicals going back to the late 1800s, where you see these accounts of healing that are published, and you see that there actually is proof that Jesus' teachings, his healings, they're practical, they're provable, they're scientific.
Yeah. They're evidence-based is what you're saying, and that's the root of science. And so it couldn't be more different than Scientology. So thank you for starting us off. That's an important distinction, and it's interesting to me that in your travels you've been finding that people conflate the two, because it seems as though, well, anyway, why ever people get confused about it, it's good to dispel the confusion.
Well, I was down in Fort Myers, Florida, and they had big sandwich boards with the title of the lecture and Christian Science, and it was in a church, Christian Science. And there was a woman in the front row who came up to me after and said, "Oh, I thought this was about Scientology, but I love this. It says God is love. I think that's great." And I thought, well, however you got here, that's good.
Well, it is. She got there, and she was able to hear your message, and it shows that your international travels and your educational work are needed.
You know, I think that another distinction there is the history of the Christian Science movement. I mean, Newburyport has got this amazing history of Christian Science there in the community. I mean, I think they first formed an informal group in 1890. So this goes way back.
Well, and the Mary Baker Eddy House is across the river in Amesbury.
Oh, right. I have been there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So not far from the Christian Science Reading Room on Merrimack Street. So there is a history locally.
I think one of the really neat things about when you find a Christian Science church, everywhere I go, these churches have an origin story.
Yeah.
The origin story always begins with healing. You know, somebody experienced healing, you know, sometimes just from reading Science and Health, catching this this paradigm shifting vision of life as inseparable from God's love. And then their response to that experience was to share it. They wanted to share what they learned, and then the healing just sort of rippled out. So I have had a Zoom meeting with the members of the Newburyport Church, and I'm actually really excited to be there because I was very inspired by their devotion to the community there.
Yeah.
And I think they chose my talk because I think the ideas express not just the way they think about their own church, but the way they think about the community there in Newburyport. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Emra. And since you brought up your talk, let's talk about the talk. Now, it has an intriguing title, Finding Where God is Seen and Felt, What Church Got to Do with It. So tell us about what you'll be educating folks about in Newburyport in your talk.
Well, thank you for saying it was intriguing. It came together in an unexpected way. I hadn't thought I was going to develop a lecture on this, but it really does mirror not just my own experience, which I can speak from my own lived experience, but it mirrors so many people's experience. You know, I would say God is seen and felt in our seeing good, in our doing and sharing good with others. So when we see that good, we're expressing our God-given nature. We're expressing really just this basic principle of life. Some years ago, Jane Goodall gave a lecture, and you know she's famous for her work with primates. But she told a story of a man who was at a zoo, and he was at the gorilla enclosure, and this baby gorilla had fallen into the moat, which was filled with water. And he suddenly found himself climbing over the fence and going down into this moat to save this baby ape out. And when they got him out of the enclosure, they asked him, you know, why did you do this? And he said, well, I saw the look in its eyes. So this desire to do good is who we basically to care for one another. And I remember Joseph Campbell saying something about how, yeah, this flies in the face of what would seem like a biological imperative to preserve ourselves.
Right.
But it's really an expression of our essentially spiritual nature, God's nature shining through where we are. And I do get how this, again, it flies in the face of what we see around us. I mean, pick up the paper this morning, and you don't see much evidence of that, but that's really, I think, the point that Mary Baker Eddy was trying to make, that the discord, the sickness, the inharmony, the small and large evils that seem so big, so authoritative, are not actually authoritative. That in fact, and you know, she goes back to Jesus' teaching about God as love. That's the biggest thing. And in fact, the only thing that has real power.
Well, that's incredibly well said, Emra. I like that, and it's inspiring. Because I think you're absolutely right, especially these days when you pick up the paper. it can be dispiriting. But what you're reminding us of, and what you're saying, the tradition and your founder, Mary Baker Eddy, the basic message there was that God is love and love is present. And it pours forth from us at times, like the stories that you gave about the gentleman who was willing to take, at his own personal risk, go save a baby creature in need. And, I think those stories are there. They don't always get as much attention, certainly not in the forum of the news. But they're there, and it's important for us to be aware that they're there and to be inspired by them and to look for them. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so true, that we actually do have a choice. And it does feel like, we're standing in front of this fire hose of reasons to be sad and mad and scared. And there is something else going on that will make a huge difference if we can turn our focus to it and see what it's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Emra, I'd like to talk to you some more about healing. What Christian Science means by healing, because I know it's one of the things that people are most interested in learning about Christian Science. And I know it'll be part of your talk, in addition to the idea that you were just naming, that, the Christian Science idea of God's love being there and available and shining through all of us. You don't need a church for that. You don't need a physical building for that, because we all carry it in our hearts, in our minds. But I think it's still, people are interested, and I'm very interested in learning more about, like, you're a practitioner of Christian Science healing, and I'd love to just learn more about how you practice that kind of healing. Who comes to you in need? How do they find you? And how do you work with people to determine what kind of healing is appropriate for that individual and what happens during a healing? And some stories, if you're able to share some, respecting people's confidentiality, of course. It'd be really interesting to learn more about what healing means.
So I'm gonna take the first part of that first. There's a lot there, and I love that you asked this. And I think it also ties in with what we were talking about being able not just to choose a different focus, but to start from a different basis. So, like, here's a healing that I don't have to worry about confidentiality because it's my mother.
Okay.
So she had tried to have a child for 16 years, and there were multiple miscarriages, ectopic pregnancy. Doctors were urging her. 16 years of this, and at that point, it was. And
but you're here, so something happened.
I'm here. Yes. So the doctors urged her, have a hysterectomy. You can't. You're physically incapable of carrying a pregnancy to term. And so she's at that point where she's got to make a decision about what she's being urged to do. And she's got a coworker in her office who, out of the blue, invites her to church. The coworker is a Christian Scientist, it turns out. My mother, who had no interest in church, or thought she had no interest in church, accepts the invitation. She starts to attend this Christian Science church on Long Island. She meets a Christian Science practitioner. So what does a practitioner do? This is somebody who has experienced real healing proof of God's care, and now they're working full-time to help others find healing the same way. So the practitioner starts by talking to her about the goodness of God, what we were just discussing, that goodness is our natural default. It's what God is doing and being right where we are, no matter what the circumstances, and that this is something anybody can find and experience. And my mother really catches this sense of things. She starts reading Science and Health, and this idea of being inseparable from God's goodness just changes her life. So she starts living more and more from this starting point of God's present goodness, right? Turning to it, expecting it to be there, and acting from the basis that it's real, that it's present. And this turns out to be this huge game changer for our family because of this growing understanding. She's able to heal my dad of a growth that was on his neck. She shares it with her sister. Her sister experiences healing. And then at the end of a year, contrary to those expectations of the doctors, she does carry a pregnancy to term and delivers a healthy baby. I owe my life to this.
Here you are. Yeah.
So it's that's. I hope that answers a lot of it. What a practitioner is doing and what a patient is experiencing, which is a realization that there is so much more than meets the eye.
Huh.
That you can start from this completely different basis and have a very different experience than what those expectations might have been. So she started from a place of, basically it was condemnation. You're lady, there's no way.
And hopelessness.
Hopelessness. Yeah.
And that there was no internal resource that she could call upon that would affect an outcome. So if I'm understanding you, then, Emra, the heart of Christian Science practitioners' healing work is to introduce and educate these new ideas and feelings about, the divine is within you, we all have it. And clearly with your mother, this touched something in her. And she followed up on it and internalized the ideas and continued to study. And what it did was it evoked a different kind of sense of herself, if I'm understanding you, where she was able to connect with her own, the God, the love that then she could access within herself because she believed in it. It seemed real to her. It was real to her. And out of that connecting link then, am I understanding you so far? Then she was able to teach others.
Well, yeah, and I think the way you're describing it, it's kind of all happening within the human mind and one human mind to another. And I wouldn't say that's the view of Christian Science. I would say it's not just she found something she could believe in, she found a completely different paradigm, which turns out to be true for everybody. That's the wonder of the revelation Mary Baker Eddy had, which goes back to early Christianity. So, I mean, this realization that it is that the heart of the discovery of Christian Science is that there's provable law behind Christian healing. It's not just if I can get you to believe, if I can get these ideas into your head. So Mrs. Eddy knew her Bible. She studied it from childhood. There's, I think, 37 accounts of healing in the Gospels, which, if you look at them, they all involve Jesus having this very different understanding of what's going on and where good comes from than the people around him. And that's at the heart of his teachings when he says, you don't have to take thought about where the good is going to come from. God loves you. God will provide for you. And the whole early Christian movement grew because people found it was true. So when Jesus meets the 10 lepers, kind of famous story, and what does everybody around him see? They see these diseased men. They see people who, they believe these people have been cursed by God. That's how they got that way, as far as they understand. And they also knew they had to keep clear of these people. But he apparently sees something very different. And there's a line in Science and Health where Mary Baker Eddy describes this. She says, Jesus beheld in science the perfect man who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appears to mortals. In this perfect man, the Savior saw God's own likeness. And this correct view of man healed the sick. So he didn't have to get ideas into anybody's head. He was just like, oh my gosh, I see who you really are. And I don't want to give away spoilers. I do talk in the lecture about how she came to her conclusion that Jesus' teachings were practical and that Christian healing was provable. And her journey, it's very much the journey of a scientist. So she's born at a time. She's born in 1821. This is a moment when religion and science are starting to divide and separate, when religion is starting to get consigned to, that's personal belief. That's what that is. And science was becoming all about assessing reality through observation,
Yeah.
measurement of matter, right? And today it's interesting because you read about quantum physics and you hear the behavior of matter is actually not objective.
Right, I know.
It's related to the observer.
Who said that if quantum physics makes sense to you, then you haven't understood it. Because it stretches the mind. So,
It stretches the mind, and consciousness makes a difference, is what they're telling us.
Absolutely, yeah.
So she's at this really amazing moment in the history of science and religion, and she grows up with a father who's insistent on Calvinist doctrine, sort of a hardliner. She has a mother who's just apparently the model of the kindness of God's love. She's got this older brother, Albert, who's gone to Dartmouth. He studied law with Franklin Pierce before Franklin Pierce was president, who shared his education with her. So she grew up with faith. She grew up with this love of God, and here was a mind at work. She expected reality to be consonant with God. And then she explored, she experimented with the health systems of her day. She was willing to think outside the box, both of conventional theology and medical theory as it was. So she kept coming back to the Bible, kept seeing in her own life the power of God's goodness. She's looking at her own and other patients' experience with medicine, and she starts to see the importance of thought. And for her, I mean, the discovery of Christian Science is thought. The thought that heals is the thought from God. There's not some package that I will hand a patient and say, hey, if you think these things, that will heal you. It's more like, if you listen, you will find that love is real and it is meeting your need. So again, not a phase of human psychology, but a revelation of spiritual reality.
Although, there was a very well-known book by Thomas Kuhn called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, which is all about paradigm shifts. And that's the word that you use, paradigm. It's a different paradigm. And it's the paradigm shifts. And it sounds like that's some of what if I'm understanding you, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding you, but the work that you do as a practitioner of healing is you introduce and inform about the paradigm shift. And then there's not so much a shift of beliefs, but a resonance that a person feels with the paradigm, that then everything flows from that. Have I understood you, Emra?
Yeah, I love the way you're putting that. That's very much the way it feels as it's happening. And I think for my mom, when that practitioner talked to her, it was like coming home. It was
interesting.
pulling back a curtain on what she'd always known in her heart. She had been a lapsed churchgoer. When the coworker first invited her, she said, "Oh, I don't go to church. I go to the beach."
Well, nature can be healing, but it's different.
Right. But, she said something really interesting after that. She said, "But you're a Christian Scientist, aren't you?" And the woman said, "How did you know that?" And my mother said, "Well, my bus to the beach leaves across the street from your church, and I see you all coming out after your service, and you look like one of those people." And the woman said, "What do we look like?" And she said, "You look full of joy."
Oh.
So, yeah.
Oh, okay, that's powerful.
So that ripple, and again, you see that with the early Christian church, because of the stories of these people, so bold, so enthusiastic, sharing this message. Something had transformed their lives.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, what do you hear then? You've worked with a lot of people on this paradigm shift, and then you've been witness to the healing that comes from people. I'm just curious to find out, what kinds of things do you hear back then from people that you've worked with? What do they say about how they've experienced the healing? Just if you can think, just be interested in hearing how people respond to it.
Well, interestingly, anybody could encounter this by going to a Wednesday evening meeting at a Christian Science church or society, because people will stand up, and the story arc is always the same. It starts with a problem. There was this problem. It was scary. It was insurmountable. I didn't know what to do. And then they'll talk about how prayer gets involved.
Yeah.
And prayer in Christian Science, sometimes it's referred to as Christian Science treatment, because you're treating your thought with what we would call divine truth. You're treating your thought with the reality of God's presence and love. And then the shift happens when you start to realize, oh my gosh, it's there. So sometimes, actually not that uncommonly, someone who's sharing this with the congregation, they'll get to this point and it becomes all about the awe of that moment. Like, oh my gosh, the problem was not what I thought it was. In fact, it's nothing compared to this amazing love that is here for me, that is here for us all. And then they'll sit down, and then 5 minutes later they'll stand back up and they'll say, oh, and the fever went away, or the rash disappeared, or my estrangement from my brother, it was yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I'm good now.
And by the way, I'm good now. But I think that tells you something about the experience, that the actual physical healing turns out to be the least part of the experience for the person. Yeah.
Well, now, Emra, there's another misconception or confusion, I think, and it seems like a good time to ask you about the relationship between Christian Science healing and the scientific field of medicine. So do doctors play a role? What is the connection, if there is one, between Western medicine and Christian Science healing? Is there room for that?
So our church is not hierarchical. There's no top-down authority that tells members. Everybody's having their own experience on this journey. They're responding in their own way to their own revelations of this healing paradigm shift. So, one of the misconceptions is, oh, you're the people who don't go to doctors.
Yeah.
And I think in my own experience growing up in Christian Science as a child, my mom was the Christian Scientist, my dad was not. And so they had this arrangement that we could pray until Dad got concerned, and then I went to the doctor. So, okay, so here's an example of that. When I was 4 or 5, my dad had gotten a swing set for me and all my little neighborhood friends, and we sat there and watched him build it, and we just couldn't wait to jump onto this swing set. And once he's tightened the last bolt, we were all over it. And I was standing on the top of the slide watching this glider go back and forth and pushing it for my friends who were in the glider. And I was kind of fascinated by the mechanism, and don't even ask me why, but I thought I would stick my thumb in the slot where the glider swung back. And of course, when it swung back, it almost completely severed my thumb.
Oh, ouch.
So, there was a lot of screaming, and my friends ran down the driveway. I ran into the house trying to hold my hand together. My mom was on the porch. She took in what was going on really fast, whipped this handkerchief out of her house dress, and starts binding it. And while she's doing that, she's singing a hymn that I would have known from Sunday school. And the hymn starts, "Oh, gentle presence, peace and joy and power." And it was a hymn I loved as a child. And what it did is it did that thing where my thoughts suddenly opened to another possibility. And the pain went away. And that sense of terror went away. Well, by this time, she's just about got it tied up, and my dad's come pounding down the driveway, and he gets us into the car, and the doctor's just 3 blocks away. But the fear is all gone.
Interesting.
And the pain is not there. And so I'm very calm driving to the doctor, and we get rushed right in past all the other patients, and he cuts this handkerchief off of my hand, and it's intact.
Wow.
There's no, it was like a little black and blue, and he said to my mother something, because we'd gone on other occasions for things that had concerned my dad, and he said to her, "You've been practicing your religion again, haven't you?"
Oh, interesting.
So, he was very supportive
Yeah.
of what she was doing because it had good effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it wasn't like my mom had some special personal healing power. There wasn't like a magic thought she got
Right.
into my head.
Yeah.
She was just so clear herself because of her own experiences.
Right.
No, God's goodness is here. That's what's really going on. That harmony, my well-being that's assured by God's love, that goodness was present, and there wasn't any question in her thought, and that I certainly felt that and then experienced it.
That's a fascinating story, Emra. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
Well, Emra, you are a great communicator. I can understand why you go around the world teaching people as clearly and effectively with such impactful stories as you do. Before we end today, is there anything I haven't asked you about that you'd really like to tell people?
Well, yeah, in your email, we talked a little back and forth about the idea of a calling. Like how did I find my calling? And I found myself thinking a lot about that since you had mentioned it. And I think, usually we think of a calling as that's when I knew I wanted to be an astronaut or, whatever. And in fact, when my girls were little, I took a turn as their Girl Scout leader, and we decided we were going to work on this badge about successful women, women who had really made the grade. And the idea I think that the Girl Scouts had was that the girls would interview these women, and they would see that there was this trajectory that they had plotted out and strategically found their calling, and there they were. So I found a physicist, a legislator, a lawyer, a cellist from a symphony orchestra. But when the girls interviewed them, the only one who had known what they wanted to do from an early age was the cellist. Everybody else had this tale of this zigzagging trajectory where they went, and they all said the same thing to the girls. They said, "You find what you love. Find what seems good to you. Follow that goodness." And that's what they had done. And so I think, probably the Girl Scout USA didn't have that in mind when they designed the badge. But I think it's these moments when we catch glimpses of a goodness that actually is a reflection of God. And then we do naturally walk that way to the best of our ability. It's those moments that truly define us. So I think, there wasn't a pivotal moment for me, but I do think that's fairly normal, and that calling maybe isn't so much about vocation as it has to do with recognizing our God-given identity, because there's this constant call to express that goodness. And maybe we read the news in the morning and we think, oh, I just don't feel like I can express any good. There's just so much to be said about. But again, to clear that away and become aware, we're the place where that goodness shines through. Let's do that.
And I think, Emra, that's the path to true happiness in life.
Yes.
Absolute true happiness and fulfillment. And it's often a very crooked path. It's rarely a straight and narrow path. In fact, one of my favorite poets, William Blake, said that improvement takes a straight and narrow path, but the crooked path without improvement is the path of genius. And I've always liked that very much.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So thank you for that, Emra, very much. And just to remind people, your talk will be Sunday, June 22nd at 2 p.m. here at the Senior Center in Newburyport. And it's clear that people will have lots and lots to learn from you, and you have lots and lots of stories, and you talk in a very inspiring and impactful and very clear-headed way. And those don't always go together, so thank you very much, Emra. It's been fun to talk to you.
I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. And if you want more information about Emra's talk or Christian Science, there's a website, of course, and it's www.christiansciencenewburyport.com. And you can go there and find more about Christian Science and also information about Emra's lecture. So thank you, Emra. You take care
Thank
now.
you, Mary.
Enjoy,
All right.
enjoy Santa Fe.
All right.
That's it for today, everybody. Please join us again next Thursday at 9 for the morning show. Until then, everybody, please be well.